How are you tonight? All right, we got it. We are recording. Very nice. All right. So, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Bloomfield Public Library and Rachel again. Whenever I host, I really like to talk about things that are out of the mainstream for the Black experience for Black History Month to give a sense of a little more wholeness and not the typical Black History Month information or history and everything. Future history, I like to think of it as, and things that people really don't quite know about in the mainstream. So it's always my mission. And so this year I chose to do Afropunk. Has anyone ever heard that term before? Anyone? Yes. One, two. Oh, we have a couple people that have. Let's see who else. I can't see anyone else on their cameras, but if you have heard of it, yay. If you haven't heard of it, you're in for trip. You're in for a treat. Definitely. You're going to have some surprises along the way. This is part of my life. I am, an Afropunk enthusiast. If anyone knows this band, that's why. Oh, someone said they attend. Denise, you attended it 2 times? Denise, if I may ask you, I know I want to take questions at the end, but at the beginning, which years did you go? Denise, you can just type that. Let me know what years you were there, because I went in 2014 and 2015. 28. Oh, wow. Okay, very cool. 2018 and 2019. I did not make those, unfortunately, but that's awesome. And they just started up again this past year, this past September. So exciting stuff. But you'll also hear that during the pandemic, they didn't stop. So you're going to hear all of that in just a moment. But before I do anything, I got to change my background really quick because I just want to honor what we're celebrating today. There we go. All right. Very cool. Get the Afropunk background going. All right. Let me share this presentation and we're off and running. Sound good, everybody? All right. We're going to share this screen. All right. So let's get into it. Afropunk, the music, the culture, and the movement. Okay, so for those that don't know, you may be asking, what is Afropunk? You might have seen images like this around the web. You might have seen pictures of the festival or of the fashion. But Afropunk encompasses a lot more than just this image, the images you see, which look very Afrofuturistic, which we'll get to later. But Afropunk truly is a musical, cultural, and political movement established to celebrate the diversity within the alternative Black existence. Afropunk is a cultural movement outside the monolithic norms of what is considered to be Black experience. I mentioned that before, that a lot of people don't know. This stuff has been on the fringes and on the underground for quite a long time. And we're going to visit some of the history of that as we do this presentation. But first, I always like to ask questions. But first, a quick history of rock music. I'm going to ask you guys a question, see if anyone knows the answer to this. What is considered the first rock and roll song? We're starting way back. So take a couple moments. Please don't Google it. Sorry, teacher. Habit. Anybody know? You can write it in the chat if you'd like. Should have put my Jeopardy music on. Anybody have any idea what's considered the first rock and roll song?
This is probably wrong, but can I try?
Go ahead, Rachel.
Johnny Be Good.
Johnny Be Good? Good guess, but no. A little earlier than Johnny Be Good. Nobody else? All right. I'm going to reveal the answer. Nobody has a guess. The answer is a song called Rocket 88 by Jackie Brenston. Also, Ike Turner was in that group as well. And it was considered the first rock and roll hit in 1951, put out by Chess Records and produced by Sam Phillips, who discovered Elvis Presley. However, there are 10 songs in the rock and roll canon that came out before 1951 that are also considered the first rock and roll. The term rock and roll kind of came from there. But the story of Afropunk actually starts with rock and roll. And it starts with the segregation of rock music. As we know, in the 1950s, as I just mentioned, Sam Phillips discovered Elvis. And because he outsold the rest of his contemporaries at that time, because Sam had resources and he had a network of albums, Elvis became the king of rock and roll due to the fact that he sold more records. He wasn't an innovator, he sold more records, which left a lot of other people left out of the situation. Chuck Berry, who many consider the king of rock and roll, Fats Domino, Little Richard. All of these artists were overshadowed by the white counterparts playing various versions of the music that they actually created. One of the first Beatles songs I ever heard was Roll Over Beethoven, which I found out was a Chuck Berry song. And last year, if you guys were at one of my other talks, we found out that Hound Dog was actually not done by Elvis, but Big Mama Thornton. So, and that's Eric Clapton there, by the way, who is credited as being one of the greatest blues guitar players. But because the promotional tools went to the white artists to sell records to white audiences, many of the artists that we know that are Black that play rock and roll were overshadowed. People like Jimi Hendrix, people like Mother's Finest in the 1970s. Tina Turner, of course, was playing rock music pretty much all the way straight through from River Deep Mountain High all the way to when she retired. She's been playing rock music the entire time, but the record labels would label much of this stuff and Funkadelic as urban music or R&B music. It wasn't considered rock music. So what started happening is a lot of the other artists, because of the labels, were putting these labels on them. Many of the white audiences didn't know what was going on. So, you know, people of African descent, African Americans, pretty much didn't look at rock as a serious genre for them to be involved in. At the same time that this is all happening, in the 1960s and 70s, a new style of aggressive expression called punk, sped up, fast, politically charged, amazingly dynamic music began to take form in the 60s and 70s in New York and London. And we all kind of know what punks look like, of course. Rebellious, spiked hair, spikes everywhere, ripped jeans, counterculture, anarchistic, moshing, and of course, high energy. Well, there's the punk movement. This is an expressive movement. But what was happening during the punk movement was the addition of skateboarding, what they call bicycle motocross or BMX biking, all became part of this expression of rebellion. Punk is about rebellion. But honestly, who better to rebel than Black people in America? The Black punk movement. As white flight and gentrification began to happen in America, and white families moved to the suburbs, Black families also moved to the suburbs for a better way of life, to escape the situations that were created in urban areas. So they moved to the suburbs. But being outnumbered, many Black youth were looking for somewhere to go. They were looking for somewhere to express themselves. And some of them chose the punk community by finding ways to express themselves, by looking at the anti-establishment messages in punk. It lends well to the Black experience. You know, if a punk is talking about how much the government sucks, guess how much it sucks for Black people? Even more so. So it was a natural gravitation to the punk movement for Black people. Of course, there's also segregation in the Black punk movement because Blacks aren't supposed to like rock and roll, quotations. So there was also segregation and racism and prejudice within the punk movement. Many, many, many Black youth, me included, would go to many of these shows and would feel isolated. We'd be one of a handful of Black people at what was considered a white thing to do, was to go to these shows and skateboard and BMX bike. But it was the culture. It's where you grew up. It's what people did. So as a result, many of these teens turned to music. They turned to expression. Bands like Bad Brains, bands like Fishbone in the 1980s, bands like, this is a band called Pure Hell. And this is Polystyrene from the English group X-Ray Specs, began to take this music and not only use it to rebel against society's norms, but also to make statements about being Black people in what felt like a captive experience. And these were the bands that on the rise that all the other youth were gravitating towards: Bad Brains, Fishbone, Polystyrene, Pure Hell, another band called Death from the early 80s. It was one of the first Black punk bands to be out there. A lot of the messages began to permeate with Black youth feeling like they could be seen. So 1980s, 1990s, this begins to kind of form. In 2001, a gentleman named James Spooner, who was a biracial youth from the suburbs, decided that he wanted to put a lens on this movement of Black punk, of Blacks rebelling against society and rebelling against the existence of being able to be Black and be in the punk scene. James Spooner and a producer named Matthew Morgan decided to come together, and they took a year. They told the story to 4 people in the Black punk movement. And the movie was called Afropunk. It's a wonderful movie if you get to watch it. It's really intense. It's long. There's a lot of cuts where you're like, why didn't they cut this? But it's really a lens, a microscope into the lives of 4 Black youth within the punk movement and how they go about their everyday lives. They shopped this around to every festival there was. They started winning awards. They started getting a lot of attention. They actually showed at about 300 festivals, and it took off. Oh, you know what? Actually, let me show you a clip of the documentary.
You know, I'm usually always the only Black person.
Usually, I'm the only Black kid at shows.
It's usually I'm the only Black person.
Yeah, I was like the only Black person there.
Wow. There's 300 white kids and 2 Black kids.
You're just like, damn.
Yeah.
There's an energy from it, you know, which you don't get from any other music.
Like the energy is just so overwhelming. It just takes over you. Like I remember I used to go to shows and I'm not gonna dance. I refuse to dance. These people are crazy.
You know, it felt natural to go out and stage dive because it was the way I let out all my aggression.
It's not just a trend or a style. There's a cultural validity in it for me. My choice to look the way I do is just based on me relating to traditionally African aesthetic, but it was through punk that I had those senses reawakened.
Okay, here's this punk show. There's like 100 kids here. 4 of them are Black. This is kind of strange. Like, how do I like go up to them and talk to them? Because sometimes, man, you'll get the straight like just this.
Like somehow I was like taking away from their uniqueness because the last time they came to the club, they were the only Black kid or something.
Hey man, this is my club. Go to the club down the street.
I meet guys at shows, so I usually date white guys.
I always wonder, how real it can be.
It's really cool. It's like, you're black and you're punk, and it's just like, I feel like, like finally I have like all the bases covered.
Hopefully in the future, like, a lot of different things will be, black.
I just wanted to be like accepted and like, look, I might look different, but I'm still a black guy.
We're not limited. We're not limited to anything.
I don't feel less black because I'm less normal.
Okay. One of the issues with being black in the punk scene is that during the course of the 80s and 90s, there was much permeation from the Aryan Nation and the White Power Nation at punk shows, which would also still make these black punks who were already looking for a home and a place to feel comfortable, even less comfortable. They weren't safe spaces. So after the documentary was created, after the documentary was created, there was such a fervor for it that James Spooner and Matthew Morgan actually created what is considered the first Afropunk Festival. In 2005, it was called the Liberation Sessions at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. It wasn't called Afropunk quite yet, but it was called the Liberation Sessions. But it featured many of the landmarks that we know of Afropunk now. Bands, films, art installations, BMX, and skateboarding demonstrations. This was a massive hit for the community because they could finally feel seen, they could finally feel safe, and they could finally feel like we have something that belongs to us. We can still be other, we can still express ourselves, but we are in a space where we understand each other. A room full of Black youth that listen to similar music and feel like we can have this other experience together. It was a massive hit. They did this festival for the next 4 years at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And they expanded to other cities as well. They had a couple events in Los Angeles. They had one in Dallas. They added poetry. And it was all free. These guys were doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. They had a lot of contributors. And there was a chance for the community to come together. 2005, 2006, 7, and 8. In 2009, they expanded even further. Because of the activity around this community, they created the first official Afropunk Festival with actual headliners outside of the Brooklyn Academy of Music. The only problem with it was because it was mainstream, James Spooner decided that it was starting to get watered down. It started to lose its message of community in favor of corporate sponsorship, which, of course, being punk, you're anti-establishment anyway. So he walked away from the festival. Matthew Morgan continued to organize. He hired some other people. He hired a team. And this is the first Afropunk Festival, which featured headliners Janelle Monáe, Living Colour, poet Saul Williams, if you guys know who Saul Williams is, and a host of other New York area bands that were on the front of the Black punk scene. So here's a little bit of footage from the first official Afropunk Festival in 2009.
Hello, I'm Janelle Monáe, and we're at AFROPUNK, and we stole the show. .com, maybe? .com. We stole the show.
And here's a little bit of footage of walking around the festival itself. Gives you a feel. One of the benefits of actually having an Afropunk festival is that many of the lyrics that were anti-establishment were also about Black liberation. And I quote from James Spooner, Black band touting Black power lyrics to a white audience is something that doesn't necessarily make sense to a white audience. So you create a space for these things to be able to exist, which is what James Spooner really wanted, and Matthew Morgan wanted as well. That's what they created with the first Afropunk. And it being free was an incredible thing. It would remain free for several years. I love that poster, by the way. It's pretty cool. As the festival moved into its years in 2010, 2011, 2012, it would see its headliners become bigger and bigger. It became more and more mainstream. 2012 featured Erykah Badu as one of its headliners. 2013 would feature Chuck D from Public Enemy, as well as Questlove, and one of my favorites there, a band called Wicked Wisdom. Living Colour as well was also there. Saul Williams came back. Many bands from overseas actually would start to join in on the Afropunk Festival. But I want to point at Wicked Wisdom. Wicked Wisdom is actually the heavy metal band of actress Jada Pinkett Smith. Does everyone know Jada Pinkett Smith? Married to Will Smith, actress in her own right. Well, if you didn't know this, she had a heavy metal band in the early to mid 2000s called Wicked Wisdom, and you're about to see them in a moment. They're no longer active, but in 2013, she brought them out of retirement to bring them back to Afropunk, because again, they didn't know how to market them, they didn't know how to put them out, and it ended quickly. But in 2013, she brought them back. 2015 would feature Lenny Kravitz, Grace Jones, Lauryn Hill, and many, many other luminaries in, yes, and Unlocking the Truth. That's right. Unlocking the Truth played several years. The youngest band to ever play Coachella actually also played Afropunk. An incredible show. I was actually at the 2015 show, and it was incredible to see not only the feel of BMX and skateboarding, but the inclusion started to happen a bit more. Punk being exclusive at the first festivals, it started to expand, which moved beyond James Spooner's image of what he wanted Afropunk to be. But the ideas and the ideals of Afropunk are really to celebrate the non-mainstream ideas of what being Black is, which is really kind of the point of Afropunk, that we're not monolithic. We don't have to like hip hop. We don't have to like R&B. There's this other experience that's going on that we can be and exist and feel comfortable in. And that's the greatest part about watching this and being able to celebrate it is the fact that there are other experiences as well. So the first one I'm going to show is actually my own footage from AfroPunk 2014. This is a band called Suicidal Tendencies from California. They're a multiracial punk and thrash metal band from California. They went on right after Ice-T's heavy metal band Body Count. And here is Wicked Wisdom from 2013. By 2013, they had moved the festival to Commodore Barry Park, which is a much larger park. Okay. Moving on, Jada Pinkett Smith. Also, in 2012 and 2013, after Erykah Badu had featured, the shift of the image from punk had started to move into Afrofuturism. Where fashion became the forefront of the Afropunk movement, at least visually, where people started to adapt an African aesthetic to their clothing while keeping a mind on the future. You started to see a lot more of this as you move into 2012, 2013, and 2014. For some people, it's a movement away from the punk aesthetic, but moving into something, yes, I agree, Denise. The fashion is incredible. But part of the Afropunk movement went from celebrating the otherness into moving into liberation, true liberation, and inclusion and reclamation of many of the fashion that was either discarded or co-opted. And it gives credit back to where the original, where the origins of these things come from. Even piercing, you think about spikes and piercing and, body jewelry. What do you think of? You think of African dress. So it was taken back from punk and put back into the Afrocentric nature of this fashion. So this started to pop up as the festival grew and grew and grew. Here's some more looks. This guy's great. So you start to see a lot more of this, as well as the music expanding as well, but becoming a different type of expression, not just rebellion and anti-establishmentism, but really about a new establishment, of a new aesthetic, of a new celebration. These are all pictures from, I believe, 2019. So if you go to an Afropunk festival, this is what you'll see. And you'll hear all different styles of music, even hip hop, you'll hear rock, but you'll hear stuff that's not mainstream. What's considered mainstream, I should say. Afropunk is considered the new counterculture as well, but it's growing. And not only is it growing in the sense of style and fashion and music, it's growing in location. In 2017, they hosted their first Afropunk in Atlanta. In 2018 and 19, they expanded to Miami, Minneapolis, London, Paris, Johannesburg, and Brazil. I almost forgot Brazil. Bahia, that's right. And Brazil. But it is incredible that this is now a worldwide global movement. During the pandemic, they hosted what they call Planet Afropunk, which is still active, where they had performances, they had social distance conversations about the lifestyle, the culture of Afropunk. So we'll take a quick look at this, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the movement, because the music and the culture have expanded to an even larger conversation.
Thank you so much, Afropunk. Thank you so much.
This is Afropunk. It's a global music festival featuring Black artists with an annual show in Brooklyn and shows this year in Atlanta and Paris. It's a movement reminiscent of the countercultural roots of hip-hop.
Afropunk, if we use one word, is about freedom. I think what defines this movement is individuality, the DIY aesthetic. I think it is pushing the boundaries of what society says that young people of color are.
They're young, they're Black, they're American. That's complex. And in this time of revolution, this time of rebellion, they're showing you what they believe. When you go to Afropunk, you see that. You see this community expressing itself fearlessly, expressing itself with humor and sex appeal and irony. What's interesting about Afropunk, it really reflects how media and images are now being traded and shared much quicker, because in one person you have piercings, natural hair, skater style, boho style, all in one person.
And to document it all, there are the photographers. This year, Afropunk partnered with Instagram to highlight the work of 4 hand-selected photographers at the Brooklyn Festival.
I began photographing at the age of 15. From there, I signed up for a photo class in my high school and realized how much I was interested in telling stories, and also how to give a voice to maybe some fringe populations. I used to walk through the streets of New York taking photos, and I remember walking through Times Square and looking up at all the giant posters and light, and not really being able to even identify myself in those images. I never really saw like any Blacks on the forefront of those images, and I felt like that needed to be challenged.
Mambu Bayo started taking photographs of Black women in his neighborhood. He took his work from the street corners of New York to the walls of his blog, Stay Sucka Free.
Tumblr at the time played an important role because it was the first time that I could get an audience to just look at my work at its most basic form.
The way that fashion works now, if you want to see what's hot, you're not running to Vogue. You're going to the blogs. You're going to Tumblr. You're going to Pinterest. You're going to Instagram. Like, you're seeing what's happening in real life in real time from real tastemakers. The community are now the curators.
And leveraging new media is central to the Afropunk movement.
Particularly for us, in looking at culture through our lens and pushing that message, and then having a community push that message out, is mind-blowing. And those images instantaneously going out globally changes everything. It changes the mindset of folks who may not feel empowered.
With the new evolution of technology and the internet, we now as individuals have a platform to circumvent certain gatekeepers and to bring it to the masses and to say, this is what I can do. As an artist, my job is to use whichever platform it is, new or old, conventional or sometimes unconventional, to let people know that there's a wider dialogue to be had.
This journey has always been about freedom, to express. And the more collective self-esteem we have in the culture, the way that we look and the way that we walk through the world will reflect that.
Okay, so Afropunk really has moved from being a rebellious statement to a statement of inclusion, to a statement of celebration. Due to the conversations of otherness and the practice of inclusion within the walls of Afropunk, the messages are changing at the festival and online. The community is no longer just about punk life. It is quickly becoming about so much more. About Black joy, about reclamation of fashion, of the past and future. The erasure of division of peoples. Afropunk proudly displays the following message on the stage throughout the festival and online as its tenets. And I'm going to share a different screen here. On the sides of the stages and throughout the park, you will see this message. No sexism, no racism, no ableism, no ageism, no homophobia, no transphobia, no hatefulness. Because the conversation of Afropunk has gone into spiritual wellness, into wholeness, into celebration. The four tenets of Afropunk now are recognized as art, music, sorry, not four, five, art, music, activism, culture, and wellness. About being well, about feeling whole and feeling celebrated. It allows diversity and freedom of expression without judgment. Afropunk creates a space that encourages the curious kid who happens to be Black and play the guitar, ride their bike, dress like their African heroes, and live in a community where such expression is encouraged and celebrated. It's a chance for those who've been abnormaled to be free and know that there is no normal. So you get the chance to show yourself. One of the slogans on the Afropunk website is "We see you." And I will share one last slide, because this is very personal to me as well, of being able to be a part of this movement.
Thank you so much, Afropunk. Thank you so much.
This is Afropunk. It's a global music.
We just saw that, and now we want to see this. So I have a thank you to Afropunk. Again, I got to attend the festival twice, and every time I felt that freedom of being able to see things I never thought I would be able to see. To be a part of this community has been huge. And to share it with the world, and now that it's global, now that it's worldwide, it's very proud to have been part of this, you know, just a little tiny part of witnessing this part of history. So a thank you to Afropunk, and a thank you to all of you for listening. Okay, thank you, Mara. Thank you so much. Okay, so
Thank
that's
you,
it from me.
Jaeme.
All right, that's it from me. So hopefully you had some questions. Hopefully I tried to touch on as much as I can. This is not complete. You know, I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the punk movement itself. I really wanted to focus on the movie and the festival and then the movement. Please go to afropunk.com, check out some of the art, check out some of the music. They have daily updates. It's not just a festival, it is a daily thing. Planet Afropunk has festivals all the time. There's a festival coming up in February featuring India Ari as its headliner. So if you know who India Ari is, I think it's called Herstory, Afropunk Herstory. It's at the Lincoln Center. So this is how much this is expanded. But yeah, thank you, Afropunk, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jaeme.